Well, 37 days, 22 hours of research, 140 plus hours of labor, and 27 3D printed parts designed from scratch is what it took to build this new triple PC setup in my small 8x9 office. All thanks to one underqualified, overconfident geek who is apparently built just a little bit different. Slightly deformed, might be a little bit more accurate, but that's personal. Today, I'm going to take you through the build of my custom triple PC Uplift standing desk, featuring a tabletop frame built with 10 series 1-inch aluminum extrusion, a hanging PC case mounting trolley system that I designed, like I said, 27 custom designed and 3D printed parts for cable management, storage, routing, and more. This video will be an overview of the build from start to finish, touching on all of the parts and tools that I used to make it happen, why I made certain design or installation decisions, and mostly to inspire anybody else to see this and implement some of this stuff into their own setup. It's one of my favorite parts of like finding awesome desk setup videos is getting inspiration for how to take cool stuff and implement it into your own setup. And I don't just mean like the gear envy part of it. I mean of like, oh, that helps a workflow, that improves a routine, that makes my life easier. That's the stuff that I love. If you are curious about anything in this project, down in the description, there's going to be a link to a master project guidebook. It is going to cover absolutely everything. I love putting time and love into these guides. It's going to have hardware, tools, parts, everything that's used. I will also be publishing all of the 3D printed parts that I designed in case you want to give any of those a shot. Some of them will have like the steps available if you want to tweak them. Others will like just be the STLs because I might be continuing to work on them. Quick disclaimer, because transparency is important. I'm going to be mentioning a lot of different parts during this build, and I do have a couple of brands that I've partnered with to make this possible. Uplift Desk, Elgato, and Inncon all provided hardware for this project for free. None of these are paid sponsored deals, but they provided hardware, and it's a good amount of hardware. Just trading content for hardware. So please be advised that any links in the description or the project guidebook that are Amazon or B&H, those are going to be tied to my affiliate accounts. So full details for that disclaimer is going to be in the video description if you need it. Here's what my office looked like on January 1st, the day before I started breaking everything down. So pretty cramped, as you can see. That TV on the wall was never meant to be a permanent thing, but it was the only spare display I had at that time. And the TV is like 7 or 8 years old, so lacking in a lot of like the high-tech parts of audio video, so that had to go. Core setup is gaming computer for PC gaming, recording streaming computer for recording audio video or doing desktop capture or live streaming, and then a MacBook for music production and other audio related things. One of the things that I loved the most in this setup was the server rack for the PCs, but because of space, those just had to go. But the new setup for how I mount the PCs is dope. Might even be better. More on that later. Now that you've seen the old setup, here's a quick rundown of what I want out of this new setup. I want to be able to effortlessly access and use all 3 PCs at any given time. I'm a geek with ADHD who is a content creator, gamer, revived musician, 3D designer, printer, and tech enthusiast. And this lovely office of mine has one critical purpose: to provide a modular and functional workspace for all of those things. The Incon's picture-by-picture feature of the 49-inch monitor is key for this. Of course, my neighbor is leaving right now. Is he actually? He's gonna sit in his truck. Wow, he actually got in and left immediately. The last time I recorded a video, he let his truck idle for 39 minutes. 39. It's a Dodge Ram with no catalytic converter. What do you think that sounds like? Wardrobe change, wallpaper change to signify the passing of time. At the core of this project is one of my favorite desks of all time, and that is the Uplift 4-leg standing desk. 72 by 30 tabletop on top of a 4-leg quad motor, sturdy as all hell metal frame that supports up to 550 pounds. I may have reached the limit if not surpassed that weight limit. Foreshadowing. The reason I chose this desk for this project is because I already have a 4-leg commercial version of this desk over on this Mac setup. Almost a year ago to date, I worked with Uplift to create some content around that desk, and through that build, I discovered that these desks were perfect for my kind of setup. The assembly of these desks are a little bit involved, but it's not complex by any means. The tabletop goes down first, and then you place each part of the frame on top of the desk and then just screw it in bit by bit with the included hardware. This is where my first tool recommendation comes in, and I've actually already shared this on X a couple weeks ago. If you are like me, and from age 0 to 34, absolutely hated working with Allen keys or Allen wrenches or hex key, whatever the F you want to call them, you need 2 things in your life. And I'm not going to bore the non-tool geeks if you're curious as to why the reasons. If you're curious, just pause here and read. But holy Christ, I love them. You need a set of Wera Allen wrenches for both Imperial and metric, and then a set of top-line Allen wrenches for Imperial and metric. I'll throw them up on the screen here. One of the top reasons I love the Uplift desks in particular, like with this frame, the frame creates these channels that are great for cable routing and cable management. I'm gonna link a video I did called 5 Tips for Cable Managing Your Standing Desk. But one of those tips is when you first build your standing desk, all the power cables that connect to the legs and the motors, secure those down out of the way as secure as possible. Those cables aren't going to move once the desk is built, so handle that now, thank yourself later. Now that the desk is built, the first custom project has started. Now, we don't have central air in this 100-year-old house, and the problem with window units is that they stick out super far into the room that you're in. I don't like that. So my idea was to build like a waterproof frame that I could push the air conditioner out of my office and into the world, just to reclaim some inches. Now, I could have gone super fancy with it, built the whole thing out of wood, sanded, primed, painted, sealed, but I'm on a schedule. So I took some measurements of the AC unit and the window, threw together some really quick designs that would help me assemble a wooden box quickly. And once the box was built, I could work on weather sealing it. So I used a combination of vinyl paper, Flex Seal tape, caulk, expanding foam, and then some white Gorilla tape. And, just kind of filled in all of the tiny crevasses with weather seal foam, and it came out perfect. It doesn't look too awful, didn't take too much time, and it's mostly going to be covered by the desk anyway, so that went perfect. Now the real question is, was all of this really necessary, or did I just need a multi-day excuse to say hi to this dog?
Oh, Diesel. Hi, buddy. Hi.
No one will ever know, because I will never tell. Old setup gone, check. Standing desk built, check. Paint job, check. Reseated AC unit, check. 1010 series aluminum frame, about to be checked. Using the extrusion as a base infrastructure for the desktop frame meant that there were no limits on how I could set it up. Being somebody who changes things constantly, I needed a setup that could constantly change with me. And that is how I landed on this design. Now, I'm nowhere near the first person to use aluminum extrusion to build a setup. This is very common, if not the standard, for people who are building like racing sims or just sim setups in general. Flying sim, racing sim, farming sim, truck driving sims. So thankfully there was a surplus of videos on how people build these out. But there wasn't any videos or any content at all about how to use like a height adjustable monitor setup. They were all fixed positions. And I don't accept that. So I designed this frame to have several vertical posts using this extrusion that I could adjust vertically if I needed to. You see, each one of those aluminum extrusions has something called T-channel, and this channel supports the use of special nuts that lets you secure whatever the hell you want to it. Some nuts can be only slid in from either side, other nuts can be dropped in and then freely moved around, and then some nuts have tiny springs that let it be stuck in place in the channel. They all have different reasons for being used, and when I first decided that I was going to use extrusion for the frame, I spent every waking moment from the beginning of a Saturday to the end of a Sunday visiting over 1,400 web pages to learn what I needed to learn in order to make this happen. So part of the project guide is going to be sharing some of the most valuable information I found about building with aluminum extrusion. So if that is something that you're interested in, hit that project guide. One of the coolest parts about building with this extrusion is that T-channel I talked about earlier is available on all 4 sides. Yeah, foreshadowing. I better come back to that later. In case I don't, I'm referring to the sides. In case you need a list of all of the extrusion hardware, nuts, screws I purchased, all of that, again, it's gonna be in that project guide in the video description. I purchased 98% of my stuff from T-Nuts, and then I got a couple of extra bags of screws, nuts, and gussets from Amazon. There's just a couple things I couldn't get from T-Nuts. The base part of the frame went together perfectly. I used 14mm M4 socket head screws to screw the bottom part of the frame to the Uplift tabletop, and then I got those 2 other screws I mentioned, I think were 2-inch Spax all-purpose screws, I think, maybe. With the desk frame built, it was time to move on to custom mini project number 2, the monitor mounting system. Knowing that the frame was going to be real beefy, real solid, I started to brainstorm how I could build off of that frame and have a somewhat adjustable mount point for that main monitor. Ergonomics are important to me, and with every new monitor being a different shape, size, different aspect ratio, being able to customize the height of where the monitor sits is a high priority. So that's how I landed on this design. In the middle of this project, I called an audible because I thought I wanted to try and use my existing Wally monitor arm so that making minor adjustments was easier. I tried it, didn't really love it, didn't like how it looked or how it worked, so I eventually reverted back to the original plan. And I'm glad that I did because it looks great. Next up, the MacBook holder thingy. So again, in the spirit of limiting the clutter that is on the tabletop and leaving lots of room for convenience and testing and shooting, I wanted the MacBook to stay off of it. I originally had it on the shelves, and then I put it up there and nope, I don't like that, too much. And then trying to plug and unplug things that are on shelves is awful. So I called another audible and decided that the MacBook should get mounted on the left side of the cage, and actually conveniently near all of the audio equipment. So I landed on this 2-part design that allowed the MacBook to slide into a holder, and then there was kind of a dovetail part that would slide into the main holder, which would allow the whole MacBook holder assembly to be secured to the 1010 extrusion. I had originally designed this as a one whole piece, but part of designing parts for 3D printing is getting things to print right and to print good. This wouldn't print right. So splitting it into 2 with the dovetail meant that it was really easy to print with no supports, and it was very snug and secure when assembled. So I was super happy with it. Let's talk about the dual PC setup for a second. The majority of the business north of the tabletop has been completed, and it is time to go down under. Was that good? Did I do it good? No? Since this is a standing desk, everything cable management is much easier if all of the hardware moves when the desk moves. When it moves, you move. That way, nothing is going to stretch, bend, or break when this massive thing is going up and down. So I wanted to secure both PCs to the underside of the tabletop so that when the desk lifted, when I was going into standing mode, the PCs would lift with the desk. I had come up with a couple different designs, and one was like an entire cradle system that the PCs fit into. Like one big metal sling. It was just too much. I even got it priced out. It was hundreds of dollars for like one piece of bent sheet metal. And then I discovered U-strut, Unistrut, U-suck, strut, U-channel strut. I don't know what the hell. There's so many different names. It's like Kleenex. Sometimes you get the brand name, sometimes you get the actual thing name. Who could know? Apparently this is used for when people want to suspend things from the ceiling or just high up.
Kind of feel it flexing a little bit right here.
They also have this little doodad with wheels called trolleys, and the trolleys fit into the channel and then travel back and forth using the wheels and bearings. Now we're on to something. All right, so idea, awesome. Cost, Christ almighty. Some of this stuff is so expensive. When I was originally looking at all of this stuff, I couldn't really understand why it was so expensive. But then I got the hardware in hand and realized just how much metal was involved. These things are so thick and so heavy. I mean, the trolleys are meant to support like multi-hundreds of pounds, so they have to be beefy. I just didn't really gauge that from the pictures online. Anyways, so this is a 3-part system. You have the trolley track hanger that secures to the ceiling or whatever you're suspending from, the strut channel that slides into those hangers. And then once that is secure in there, the trolleys then slide into the strut channel, and then with the trolley wheels gliding back and forth on the lips of the strut channel. And then the wheels that are gliding thanks to the bearings allow it to slide back and forth on the lips of the strut channel. When I first designed this, I had the strut going all the way from front to back of the desktop. Now, what I didn't think about until I actually started to build it was if that channel went all the way front to back, then the PC would have to come all the way forward past the front lip of the desk to get unmounted, which means every cable would have to get unplugged to bring the PC down. No, thank you. So after a day of like spacing and orientation testing, I came up with a design where I could still use the majority of the strut channel just for the rear trolley. So the PC would get lifted up, the rear trolley would mount into the strut, slide backwards, and then the front trolley would just hang inside of a cradle that I designed. So this was really tricky because of the dimensions of the tabletop, where the track hangers could be placed on the underside of the tabletop, how secure those hangers would be to basically 1/2-inch particle board. And this is where the power of 3D printing came in again. I would think I had it figured out, but then you have to factor in how much the PC can tilt before the trolley wheels can't get into the strut channel. It was a day. So I designed a spacer that would bring the track hangers down about 1 inch because they weren't quite low enough in order for the U-strut channel to pass along the uplift frame. Using the pass-through hole on the track hanger and the spacer, I could screw the hanger to the bottom of the desk, and then I designed a cap that went over that entire assembly, which gave me 4 additional screw holes for securing that hanger to the underside of the desk. So just printed those in white PETG and it came out almost perfect. I did have to chip off the corner of one of these pieces just as opposed to reprinting it because I was printing them pretty thick. It was a lot of filament, a lot of time. By the way, everything printed for this desk, it's all in PETG. I've never printed so much PETG in my goddamn life. And now the worst part of any project, cable management. I need to be very clear on my stance with cable management. I hate it. I think it's stupid, it's a waste of time, and it destroys lives. Like equal to alcoholism or gambling. That's how dangerous it is. Is it really that serious? No. But it feels that way. Here's my problem. What we deem cable management in 2025 is securing and hiding as many cables as possible, by any means necessary, which is great when you want to post a picture of your clean setup to Instagram once a year. But when you change hardware as often as I do, plugging, unplugging, installing, uninstalling, it can be a nightmare. A lot of the times, most people are just shoving power, data, and audio cables into these massive bundles and Velcro and zip ties, which is like, first of all, an audio interference nightmare. I want to keep all my cables separated, at least keep the audio cable separated. And I keep it separated. I've seen all the cable management solutions, 3D printed ones, non-3D printed ones, and I'll be honest, I went into this project with the plan of using the underwear cable management system, which is, I think, built off the multi-board ecosystem. But when it came down to it, I just did not have the mental bandwidth or the energy to go down the research, print, test, repeat, part catalog, analysis, paralysis, black hole of an ecosystem of parts. Choose from 20,000 different parts.
Great! You know what that is?
Right.
That's just
Great!
But really though, if you haven't checked out the underwear system for cable management, it's pretty awesome. The creator is hilarious. Their launch video is hilarious. Just the whole system is awesome. It's just not for me for what I wanted to do here. So if that's your jam, check it out. So this is when I called Audible number 3 and decided to go with my own cable management solution that I've actually been using for the past couple years in a few different ways, just redesigned this time. I call this method cable loop routing, which is just an awful name for the method of loosely routing cables with a series of loops. It prevents cables from just kind of dangling everywhere, but doesn't manage them, but also just gives them direction. Now, when I first started using this method, I was just taking like plumbing pipe wrap that it's like this hard plastic wrap that has holes. I would just make a circle and then screw it to the bottom of my desk. It worked amazing, did exactly what I needed, looked awful. Absolutely awful. So about 8 months ago, I started designing my first cable loop routes that would be 3D printed and then screwed to the bottom of the desk. These worked like just okay. They were kind of brittle, and eventually I just stopped designing them because I knew I was going to do a better job in January 2025. One of the reasons I wanted to use extrusion for this project, I'm actually calling back to earlier in the video, I remembered, was to be able to utilize that T-channel that was facing the rear of the desk. The rear facing channel allowed me to design these hanging loop routes that could screw directly into the extrusion and then just kind of hang down below and hold all of my cables. So this would allow me to slide any of the cable management parts I designed back and forth along the channel, and these designs could be any size or shape that I wanted. The only requirements was that I needed a hole to secure to the extrusion in my prints. That was it. So I came up with a bunch of different designs. My personal favorite was the triple channel loop route. It might be the triple channel XL with a clip on it. Anyways, smaller top channel for my audio cables to stay away from everything else. Larger middle channel that was for anything power, data, USB, or other. And then finally, an open-ended channel that lets you just kind of push cables into it for them to just sit. This was more of like overflow or any cables that had power connectors that were too fat to fit through parts of the other channel. I designed a lot of cable management parts. One of my favorite parts are these snap-in loop routes for the 1010 series extrusion. The clips on the end allow the part to be snapped into the extrusion, and then the rounded base is so that you don't hurt your thumb when you're actually pressing this in, because it takes a lot of force. That rounded base also doubles as a lip for removal if you need to. You could probably get like 4 to 5 snaps and removals before that clip probably is gonna break. They have a taper design so that you can have a little more room for thicker cables, and then a open clip design so that you don't have to pass through every cable. You can just kind of shove them in there. That entryway on the clip has a ribbed for her pleasure design, so if the clip is getting full, you can just kind of rest the cables in there and it'll hold them shut. It's awesome. The other part I designed for the dual PCs that were hanging was this large panel of loop routing. Again, I just want cables to get to the right place and have slack. I don't need them to be super secured that I can't move the PC at all. So this larger piece just got secured to the underside of the strut channel. This gave something for my 8-port patch panel to secure to, and then I could just have a bunch of thin Cat6 patch cables that go to every network device that's over there. Then every cable would be routed over to the PCs where they need to get plugged in, and all of the excess cable length would just kind of drape and hang, and it just makes plugging and unplugging way easier. Last on the cable management list were these larger cable hangers for the sides of the desk. Sides? Wait a minute, Nicholas. Is that aluminum extrusion on the sides of your desk? Why, yes it is. The sides. Call back. I remember it again. So this is a smaller kind of single channel extrusion. I think it's called 1050EX, I think. Single channel. One of my last minute genius ideas was to put this aluminum extrusion on the left and right sides of the tabletop. It's just a couple millimeters wider than the thickness of the tabletop, and it fits almost perfect. Now, my original idea was for my guitar amp to actually hang from this so that I could get it up off the ground and then utilize the space underneath the amp for guitar pedals or whatnot. That didn't quite work out because remember earlier when I said I might have hit the weight limit of the desk? I think I overloaded it. So yeah, we're gonna play it safe. We're just gonna keep the amp on the ground, and it's okay because I'm less likely to play through the amp than I am to play through the studio monitors, because a lot of what I do is in plugins. These cable hanging loops allow me to keep any of those cables that I use often close by, but void of any cable ties or Velcro, and I can unravel and ravel them quickly. And then this little mini hook on the end that lets me dock the end of the cable so that it doesn't come unraveled on its own when I'm just out there hitting it with my hips. Real quick, I want to mention another one of the 3D printed parts that I designed, because I got asked about this on both X and TikTok. The mounts, or the brackets rather, for the studio monitor. In my original design, I had wooden shelves that were going to be platforms for the speakers, and they were going to go top left and top right, here and here. Now, because the speakers had such an amount of depth, these wooden ones up top were going to have to be pretty huge. And I was like, I'm kind of bummed about that, but it is what it is. Then I remembered, I still have the speaker stands that were attached to the wall. Can I reuse those? What do you think? Yeah, look at that. Look at that. I can't see what you see. So I took the metal bracket, this usually screws to the wall. I slipped in some sliding nuts into each of the channels, and then I was able to get 3 of the 4. And now it is just rock solid. Not only that, this will allow the speaker to be really high up, and now I have more room for activities here. I just have like more shelf room, which I'm stoked about. Screwing in these Wally wall mounts with only 2 of the 4 holes was already really solid, but I wanted more, so opened up Shaper 3D, designed a few L brackets that would let me use all of the holes for mounting, and then I could pair it with some additional hardware that would just allow me to connect it to other sides of the extrusion along the back side of the frame. Worked perfectly, I loved it, and that design is for you to download or manipulate if you need it. Okay, let's go back above sea level again, because we have some shelves and mounts to install. So circling back to the beginning of the video where I mentioned that the verticality of these extrusions was key for this project, and not only for mounting the main monitors, like the main display monitors, but for the shelving and the studio monitors as well. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I struggled a bit with these designs of the shelf brackets, or shelves. And installing the shelves was one of the most frustrating moments of my life. Not just this product, my life. If you want to have a bracket that secures to the aluminum with 2 screws, but then can also secure to the wooden shelf with 2 screws, you need to have 4 pathways. 2 for screws, 2 for tools. On top of that, it is really hard to make brackets that are low profile so that they're less of an eyesore while still being sturdy. And then you have to decide, do you want these to be an open frame design or a walled off design to keep it clean? How wide, how tall? This was actually pretty tough. It was probably the most difficult design of this entire project. By the end of a weekend designing, I was able to consolidate all of my designs into a very select few, 18. I could not stop designing brackets. I was so frustrated, and I kept thinking I could do better, and I never did. Some of these brackets are for 4-inch shelves, some for 6-inch, some for the front, some for the back. To be honest, I got so sick of trying to mount shelves that there are probably 7 different designs of brackets on this frame right now. So if anybody wants to take any of my bracket designs and remix them, you're more than welcome. I never want to design a shelf bracket ever again. The ones I have are good enough, and I need to move on with my life. Along with the shelves came my very first WLED project. So to summarize this quickly, WLED refers to a project in which you can flash microcontrollers with firmware that creates kind of like a mini web server for controlling LEDs, either via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, or something like Home Assistant. There are apps for phones, PCs, smart home. WLED is super awesome. So what I did was I purchased 2 WLED controllers. I split each controller and then connected 2 LED strips on each side, like on the other end of that split. So that let me control each level of lighting underneath the shelves per shelf story, That didn't sound... It let me control the middle level and the bottom level independently on both sides. I think that's right. I'll just show you. Since I host Home Assistant via Docker on one of my unraid NASs, as soon as I connected these microcontrollers to my Wi-Fi, Home Assistant found them and then allowed me to turn them on and off pretty much instantly. I just used the adhesive on the back of the LED strip to secure it to the bottom of the shelves. I decided to not go with any diffusion. I just didn't do enough research before I jumped into it, and the shelves are already so short. I didn't want to like add extra bulk of things that my hands could run into. Maybe there's some low profile diffusion out there. I just got to find it. Before I dive into the tech of all of this, like the PCs and the audio, I want to tell you about this chair. This is the Capisco by Hag. Now, my white Michigan ass wants to pronounce it Hag, but I think it's Hug? Hog?
Eller det kommer man ihåg resten av livet. Hog.
Hogue? 99% sure it's Swedish. This is an ergonomic task chair that is sold on Uplift's website. Now, I've been using this chair for about a month and a half now, and I have mixed feelings on the comfort side of it. Everything else, I love. First, notice that I said task chair, because I don't think that this is meant to be an office chair for which you're sitting hours and hours and hours. It is very firm, and the shape forces you to be conscious about your posture, and any slouching results in soreness and fatigue, and it's easy to get lazy sitting in it if you're not like super in shape like me. Now, I prefer not to have any armrests on my chairs. Never use them, hate them. While this chair doesn't have them, there are these swoops that not only allow you to sit back and kind of rest your arms, which is perfect for like doom scrolling or just chilling out, you can also rotate the chair and sit with the back seat up against your chest, which I love when it's time to switch it up. The base of the chair is also super low to the ground, which lets me put my feet up, but not have my knees bash into the underside of the desk. You can see the base is like super low to the ground. I love this chair a lot, but I'm gonna need a couple more months before I figure out if it's actually going to be in here for hours of sitting, or if it's going to be a better fit to be out in the workshop where it's constant like standing up, sitting down over and over for in like short sprints. My final reason for choosing this chair was because of how low profile it was. So when I stand up at either of these desks, there's nowhere for the chair to go that is not in the way. And since there's no headrest and the back is pretty low, when I put one of these desks into the standing position, I can just push the chair underneath that desk. Or if I just need to work in the office and I don't have any of the desks in a standing position, I can push it in and it just doesn't take up a lot of space. Whereas all of my other office chairs that have a large back and a headrest, they stick out too far. It's just always in the way. So the core of the project is completed. Desk, frame, PC undercarriage, cable management, and lighting, they're all set in place and ready to go. Time to show you the dope tech that makes it all work. So first up, the 49-inch ultra-wide monitor from Inncon. This is the 49C1R model. So this monitor is dual QHD, so aka a dual 1440p 120 Hz VA panel. This is a 32:9 aspect ratio monitor, so it's like having two 24-inch monitors that are 1440p smashed together, without a bezel in the middle. Now, the reason that those specs are important is because this monitor has both picture-in-picture and picture-by-picture modes, meaning that using either the USB-C port, DisplayPort, or HDMI, I can plug in two completely different computers and have them show up side by side, like one is a 24-inch and one is a 24-inch. Like having the PC on the left and the MacBook on the right, or the MacBook on the left and the recording PC on the right, or gaming PC all 49 inches, or MacBook all 49 inches, and just switch between them whenever I want, depending on how I have them set up. Now, I don't like to use hardware KVMs with monitors when it comes to gaming, because I don't want to rely on the hardware that is in the monitor to handle the switching. I prefer to use software KVM. My favorite is Synergy 3, which allows me to seamlessly switch between my gaming PC and my MacBook and my recording PC using a single keyboard and mouse. I have used all of the closed source and open source software KVMs that are out there, and I've actually done a couple of videos on my experience and why I chose Synergy 3, but in my opinion, Synergy 3 is by far the best, especially if you're doing Mac and PC. Using that in conjunction with this monitor is like truly a seamless experience. This lets me have two PCs side by side and there's no lag between them. And also because I have this 18-inch 1440p monitor down here, I can go from gaming PC to MacBook or MacBook to recording PC and vice versa. One keyboard, one mouse for all of that. It's amazing. And I'll get back to this tiny monitor in a second. If you don't want to go the software KVM route, this monitor does have two USB-A, one USB-B, one RJ45, and a 3.5 millimeter audio jack to manage your mouse, keyboard, display, audio between those two PC sources. Now this is a gaming monitor, so it's also sporting adaptive sync and HDR 400. Something that is important to me is color accuracy. And this panel has 99% sRGB color gamut and then a 3000 to 1 contrast ratio, which is pretty good. So far, this monitor has been awesome. There's a few drawbacks going with this particular monitor. These monitors being behind, I can get a considerable amount of glare, so I have to be mindful of like having a bunch of apps with big white screens open while I'm gaming in the dark. And then the bigger issue was I was under the impression that I could have two sources that would both be 1440p 120 hertz. And that is not the case. The 120 hertz is only for a single source, only using DisplayPort 1.4 port, not the HDMI 2.1 port, which if you know anything about those specs, HDMI 2.1 should be able to do that no problem. But for whatever reason, there's a hardware limitation with the 2.1 port on this monitor. Meaning I can't pass through 1440p at 120 hertz if I was running in a picture-by-picture mode. I was really hoping that I could use the Elgato capture card to have my streaming PC on one side, gaming PC on the other side, be able to pass through the 1440p 120 hertz so that I could game at that resolution and frame rate, and I could also capture at that resolution and frame rate, but that is not going to be possible, unfortunately. If I'm in the split picture-by-picture mode, everything is 60 hertz, which to be honest is a pretty huge bummer because that was one of the main specs that is required for doing what I wanted to do when I selected this monitor. So figuring that out after the fact was a bummer, but it ended up being okay. It forced me to download Moonlight and Sunshine, which is an open source project for sending gameplay extremely fast and extremely high resolution and frame rate over the network. I hadn't tried it in some time and it just got me reacclimated with it again. So I'm currently testing that out right now. Gaming has been awesome on it, even though my gaming computer is an Intel 8700K, but it is definitely failing to keep up with my 3080 Ti. So it's going to be time to build a new gaming PC pretty soon. But all that said and done, star of the show is the picture-by-picture mode when I want to work with my gaming PC and my MacBook side by side. I do it almost every other day. Switching between them with the OSD on the monitor can be a little finicky. Like it's too many clicks to do the switch. I wish there was like a quick switch mode, but OSDs for monitors are always awful. If you get a monitor that has a good control interface, you're lucky because most of them are terrible. The smaller monitor down here is the UPERFECT 18-inch 1440p 144 hertz panel. Sometime in 2024, I changed my monitor layout on my Mac by putting a 24-inch 1440p monitor below my ultra-wide. I immediately fell in love with that setup, and I knew that I was gonna have to put that over here as soon as possible. Now, instead of going with a traditional monitor, I actually went for a portable monitor because of how thin and low profile they are. I had lots of internal battles trying to figure out what size I wanted for the lower monitor, and because 24 inches over here honestly was just too chunky, it just took up too much space, I opted for the UPERFECT 18-inch monitor. This is one of the few portable monitors that also had VESA mounting, which I thought I was going to use, but I ended up not doing it and going a different route. It being too close to the Elgato Studio just made getting to monitor inputs a pain in the ass, and I hated it. I still might go back to it. I've been thinking about a different design that would allow me to mount the monitor with super strong magnets, similar to my iPad Pro mounting design, but another day. Now, the trick to having a monitor down low, at least something that's super important for me, it has to be floating in a way. Because if it's not, if it's sitting on the desk, you're cutting off the pathway for any cables to pass under it. that sucks ass. So I went back to my design software. I designed a really simple riser that I could screw into the back of the monitor that would lift it up just a little bit so that any cables for mouse, keyboard, Xbox controller, those could all just pass underneath. Now, something that I thought I was going to hate with this monitor that I ended up loving, and I think it's one of its best features, is the articulating foot and or stand that's in the back that controls the angle of the monitor. Most of the portable monitors out there either have one or a few different angles that it can be set up in, and then you set up and you're stuck. The stand of this one is completely adjustable and it can be any angle that you want. So I originally purchased a tension arm so that I could adjust this however I wanted it and could be, float in the air. Ended up not being necessary, especially with the riser. So if you get this monitor, pair it with a couple of 90-degree or 180-degree adapters for both HDMI and USB-C, and you've got yourself a perfect adjustable lower monitor that is up off of the desk. I love it. I love it a lot. Another amazing piece of tech that I'm so excited about. One of the things that I didn't get as far into configuring and testing before I finished editing this video was the Stream Deck Studio. If you didn't already know, Elgato released this monster back in 2024. It is a Stream Deck, but aimed at a different group of people. This isn't your typical Stream Deck, and it isn't meant to just sit on a desk for an everyday gamer or streamer. This is a production industry professional targeted device, and it has a bunch of additional features and functionality that are geared towards those people. All metal design, dual rotary dials that are also buttons, NFC reading, USB expansion, PoE+. PoE is power over Ethernet, so the ability to get plugged into a network switch and receive power from the switch, and that's all you need, which is awesome. So that Stream Deck Studio is actually not plugged into any of the computers. It is plugged into the network switch over in my rack. The Stream Deck is now a network device that is able to communicate with anything else on my AV network. So all 4 PCs in this room all have dual and in some cases triple networking connections. They all have a 10 gigabit per second primary NIC for my main network. All 4 of the machines have a second 1 gig NIC that is just my AV network. So separate switch, separate network, VLAN, so none of the audio video traffic is getting sent over the 10 gig NICs. It's all done on that separate network. I did, however, figure out that the Stream Deck Studio and the companion app by BitFocus supports my Behringer XR 18 digital mixer out of the box.
Now watch this. See this button? See this? Ba-dum. I can mute and unmute all those channels right from here. Right now, the streaming PC has audio going out into channels 15 and 16 on the mixer, and I currently have the left and right of those muted. A little wobbly.
The combination of all of these things has just made this setup so powerful and so functional. And I think this is probably one of my best projects to date. And the original idea just ended up unfolding to perfection. Everything about it, I love. And I'm so happy to be working with it every day.